Well, look, the details will be clear when a final decision's announced. But we put out a proposition around the essential skills visas, changes in the parameters there, and we put them out deliberately for consultation. There's been a response to that which we're listening to, and it's come from across the board, from employers and business and employees actually. And migrants, and so we'll be taking that into account. But you wouldn't be looking at wholesale change. We'd just look at changing some of the parameters.
So would you reduce that salary band?
Well, as I said, we'll look at changing some of the parameters, but you'll have to wait and see where our considerations get to. I mean, we've got the submissions; they're being looked at.
Could we see targeted salary bands to the regions, say to Auckland, higher in Auckland, lower in Southland? Is that an option?
Look, I wouldn't comment on the particular parameters, but I would make this point that in an economy that's producing 10,000 new jobs a month, that demand for skills applies right across the country, Auckland and in the regions. And I think the extent of it in the regions, the strength of that demand is surprising some people. But equally in Auckland, if we're going to build the 35,000 houses the government said it's going to build, a proportion of the 60,000 houses enabled by the Housing Infrastructure Fund, the thousands more that will be enabled by Crown Infrastructure Partners, we're going to need people in Auckland to do it. So they're not an exception to the demand. They're part of the strong demand for skills.
So why not let the market decide here by having employers increase their wages to attract staff and change their systems, invest in R&D to try and improve their productivity as staff and therefore justify the higher wages?
And I think you see that happening in parts, particularly in the construction industry, where there's a lot of discussion now about how to deal with the fact that there's so much work, there's such a long pipeline and it's so strong, and the opportunities to do just the things that you've said.
Surely these people, you'd expect them to be paid more than $48,000 a year though, because they're in industries for which there's a lot of demand for. So why would you need to look at changing that wage cap?
Well, as I said, you'll just have to wait and see just what decisions is, because the decisions haven't been made. But we're listening to the feedback.
And were the main concerns that people didn't want to pay their workers that much money? Oh
no! Look, the main concern has been people being able to, or businesses and regions being able to get the people they need to do the work that's available. And I think pretty well all the politicians have had that message, including Mr. Peters.
Well, surely they'd have a better chance of attracting those people if they had to pay them more.
That's right, and they've got to take that into account, and that's part of the balance we're trying to achieve here. Is getting the skills we need for the jobs that are available, making sure that New Zealanders have appropriate opportunities for jobs they could be getting, because we have a strong interest in that, and not being in the position where our industries find themselves becoming completely reliant. Now I must say there's been a good discussion over the last 12 or 18 months with a number of our industries, particularly horticulture, but hospitality coming to it as well, where they need to understand it's not the government's job to go and procure their workforce. It's their job.
So if you're going to let them off to just keep going ahead with the status quo, then how could you expect change to come through?
Well, it's not a matter of letting them off. I mean, we're doing both, making sure that. Remember, this discussion has come about because we've been trying to get the mix of skills differently. That was the core of the propositions in April. So that was a change in proposing to change the status quo. And alongside that, we're having increasingly constructive discussions with these industries about make sure they don't become reliant on government policy to supply their workforce.
But you seem to not be changing government policy once they drive out. Like you put out a set of proposals, they said they don't want them. You've indicated you're going to row back on those proposals. So it seems like they're concerned with having to pay workers more and also maybe spend more for training local workers. So why not initiate the the proposals that you put up a few months ago?
Well, we have, and the outcome, it won't be the one that you're describing.
So of those submissions, those 170 odd submissions government received, how many of those address the issue of that salary band being decreased?
Oh, look, I couldn't give you detail about that.
Was it the majority though? Was the issue around
Yeah.
the pay?
Well, honestly, I couldn't give you detail about that, but the general level of feedback has been pretty straightforward.
So what's the timeframe for a decision on this?
Oh, the next few weeks.
Using your argument that the huge increase in immigration is down to Kiwis coming home and staying home, why then do they need overseas workers so much if there are those Kiwis coming home?
Well, the key element of that argument is Kiwis not leaving, actually. So in the last 5 years, there's been estimated that about 150,000 Kiwis have stayed home who 5 years ago we probably thought would have left. The fact is the economy's growing, the demand for skills continues to grow. We've already talked about construction and infrastructure. That's just one industry where that demand looks like it's going to be strong for some time. And other industries have made, I think through their public statements, made it clear that they think that they've got very strong demand too, whether it's, trucking or horticulture or agriculture or hospitality, aged care is another one. So, we do have, these are real services that have to be provided actually, next week, the week after, next year. So we've got to have to take into account those issues.
Those industries that you've mentioned are traditionally quite low-paid industries, though, so why let them away with that, I guess?
Well, I think we've already had some of that discussion. It's not a matter of letting people away with it. It's a matter of making sure that we've got the people to do the work that has to be done. Like you have to service the tourists, you have to build the houses, you have to look after the old people. There's no choice about that. And working with the industries to make sure that they are adapting to this situation. And the point I'm making is that they seem to me to be getting significantly more constructive about that.
So when you developed your proposals, did you not expect the blowback from it? Did you think that businesses and so forth would accept those changes?
Well, there's some new aspects of the rules, and that's why we put them out for consultation, because you can, when you're doing the policy, you can make some assumptions, but you have to test those. And I think the strong demand for skills in the economy has continued. It's particularly in our regions, it's remained strong, and that's what's reflected in the discussion.